Hi guys, welcome back to Blackbird 1619. We took a little break over the holidays. Hope yours were good and you were safe and enjoyed your family. And yeah, hope you had a nice holiday. Welcome to 2021. This is our first episode. I know that things have already gone slightly awry this year, and we will discuss that. But today, talking about our book that we read. So we read Kindred by Octavia Butler, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Micah's going to give you any housekeeping things. Micah?
Yeah, it's short today. So if you have comments or suggestions, you can leave them here on the YouTube, but even better is to go to the Facebook. There's a link below. Megan is on the Facebook and she'll answer questions and she will talk to you.
I'm on the Facebook.
And then we just have a couple of links to some articles. And then for you today, we have two different YouTube interviews with Octavia Butler.
They're really interesting and really good. She's a very interesting person.
Yeah.
On that note, we'll talk to you a little bit about Octavia Butler and who she was and what she was about or whatever. So she was born in 1947 in Pasadena, California. Um, and like from everything that I read, she says that she started writing when she was 10. She started sending things out to be published when she was 13. I think she was like her first actual thing that she got published. I think she said she was 21. But she always felt like she was a writer. Like it was the only thing she could ever imagine doing. And I thought it was really interesting because in one of the interviews that's linked down below, they talk about the genre or genre, depending on how you like to pronounce that word, um, of science fiction, and she talks about sort of is ethos? I don't know. The like what people think of science fiction. Like when you hear the word science fiction, and in the interview, she's like, people hear the word science fiction and they think Star Wars, but that's not all science fiction is. Like there are other things that fall into science fiction, and that's why she sort of chose to write in science fiction. But she also mentions that occasionally it was a hindrance to her. Like she wasn't reaching everybody that she wanted to reach because there's a perception of science fiction being for like 14-year-old boys.
I
And
think
like that's
especially
all who reads it.
when she was trying to write, that's especially true.
Yeah.
Like it's less true now. Like people are into like Game of Thrones, which is fantasy, but at the time, like Star Wars nerds was they were young white men.
So I thought that was interesting. And she mentions that like she actually moved to like a smaller publisher. And when she moved to a smaller publisher, her books started to be read more because they started putting her in, smaller bookstores, feminist bookstores, black-owned bookstores, and then she started to get sort of the wide readership that she had been looking for instead of being like stuffed in the corner with the science fiction book. So I thought that was really interesting to know about her. Anything else that Micah or Elizabeth, that you guys found out about her? Or did I cover it all? Sorry.
I went in looking for like what was it like for her to be writing in a genre that was dominated by white men,
Mhm.
and I didn't find so much of that. I guess because like writers aren't really your coworkers, like you don't go to the office with them. But what she did talk about was reading science fiction, and the only black characters that she found were characters that were like really weak or they were like one-dimensional. And she decided she was going to fix that by writing herself and her experiences into her books. And so like that was her big thing about like getting black people into the genre, or
Yeah.
like characters into it.
Yeah, I really liked that because she mentions like that in some of her interviews is that like she got to write herself in, right? Like there weren't very many characters, and so she got to write herself. She got to write a book and put herself in the book
Yeah.
in various ways, obviously, which I thought was really interesting. She also won a ton of awards. I wasn't able to find, maybe Micah, you were. Has anyone else won the MacArthur grant in sci-fi?
One
Or
article said she was, or two articles said she was the first, and one article says she's the only.
yeah,
And I didn't like go deep diving in it, but she was certainly the first science fiction writer. Period. Not the first woman, not the first Black person, but the first writer. Period. Which is really
amazing.
cool. Yeah. And she downplayed it in an interview because the MacArthur grant is known as the Genius Grant, and she's like they didn't take an IQ test. I think someone who is so driven to be a writer that they literally can't do anything else, that is genius, you know?
Mhm.
It also goes that you can't nominate yourself for the award. Somebody has to nominate you for it. And when she found out that she won, she didn't even realize that she was up for it. She thought it was like a potential prank call. I think she said, I didn't know if it was on the level, her words, you know what I mean? Which is kind of interesting, but also got to be endearing that, you know, you were respected by your peers, that they felt that you were worthy of such an honor. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so yeah, lots of and some of these I'm probably gonna say in 1984 she won Best Short Story Hugo Award. And then the is it Nebula Award?
Yeah, for
Also,
Blood Child.
yeah, for Bloodchild. Um, no. I think that's, I mean, there are others. I think the MacArthur one is sort of like the biggest one.
Yeah.
Um, because, and like that too, like in some of the articles and reading about it, people are like, what did that mean for you? And she's like, it meant I could buy a house and I didn't have to. She's like, even though she was at that point, you know, a pretty well-respected writer, she was still freelance. And she was saying, like, even though you know the money's coming, you don't always know when it's coming or like, you know, when it's going to get there. And so she was saying like that fellowship or award um, enabled her to like live comfortably while she continued to do what she loved to do. And I think that's really awesome, personally. Um, so in 99, she moved from California to Seattle. And then in February of 2006, she passed away at her Seattle home, and she was 58 when she died. Um,
May I add one more thing?
absolutely. Mhm.
So last year, in her posthumous, you know, accolades, she finally reached New York Times status for
Yeah.
what I don't think it was the talents one. I forget the sower.
Yes.
Yeah, that for that particular book, which is always one of her goals that she wanted to accomplish, and even though it happened posthumously, still a pretty good achievement. Sorry, I butchered the word. I can't say it today.
The book is Parable of the Sower.
There you go.
Because those were her last two books, the Parable series. Or her
Yeah.
last two books that
It
she
was one of her big goals. And she finally, after she passed, but she finally reached it, which is really cool.
Indeed.
absolutely. So let's talk about this book because it's awesome.
Okay, can I be transparent? So, readers and followers out there, I'm only about halfway through it, so you will see me exit after a while, so I don't have the book spoiled for me. Um, on that note, I thought in starting out, I just knew we were reading this book. I was unfamiliar with Octavia Butler. you know, I'm not a big reader, guys, so don't hate me for that. Doesn't matter who wrote it or whatever. I read instructions. I don't read books, but I had no idea that she was a sci-fi writer, and so I'm reading, and she gets dizzy and travels back to a slave. Huh? What's going on here? And, obviously, as I kept reading, very intriguing. I'm a big sci-fi fantasy kind of person anyway, and what I've gathered, very well written. You can tell that the research and the way she gets you to visualize both worlds of a 1976 Los Angeles working temp services and things of that nature, as well as the early 1800s era time periods that she's going through, at least from what I've read so far. I don't know how far she travels in the future, but I just think that she described those worlds so vividly and really transports you there. You know what I mean? And having not read a whole bunch of books, I know when I'm entertained, if I can sit down and read for 3+ hours, you know, instead of wanting to be on social media or keeping up with the news or watching TV or something, I'm like, no, let me see what's going on, you know?
I
Yeah,
think it really sucks you in, especially with like the prologue. So in the prologue, she's like loses her arm. It's like stuck in the wall. And this is one of the most bananas like beginnings of a book I think I've read in a long time. But it's definitely one of those like, oh my god, what happens next? Like, you know.
Why are you stuck in the wall?
right?
Definitely.
Yeah,
It was and I was say I am and I saw this comment a lot too when I was like looking at her stuff from a lot of people who were like, I'm a sci-fi person. I read sci-fi. And I do, like I tend to read fantasy novels and science fiction because that's what I like. Um I read other things obviously, but that's where like my home is. And I hadn't heard of her, and I was like really surprised because like what the more I've like read the book and like looked at things, like she's everywhere. There are being movies made, and people are talking about making movies about her books, and it's like, especially I think seems like here, like since she died, since she passed, has sort of like skyrocketed into popularity, which could be why I haven't heard of her because I tend to ignore things that are really popular, just out of principle.
yeah, I hear you. I agree.
So that could be why. But when I started reading her, and I think on the Facebook page when I mentioned we were going to read this book, I think a couple of people were like, "Oh, I love Octavia," and I was like, "How do you know?" But so it is a really good book, and I'm like Joe was saying, she really paints a picture and like gets you involved in the book. And for me, she does it really well because I don't like a lot of extra like description. I'm like a newspaper. Like I want to know what's going on and what's happening and like let's move. And she finds a really nice balance between like driving the story and like enveloping you in these worlds. Um,
One
so
of the things that I found great is she describes an aspect once, and then after that is like, you know, she doesn't go through putting in those details and just beating you to death with the same details over and over, you know. She's like, you've already read it, let's move on, you know, I've already set the tone, let's get to the point now, you know. And yeah, it's like movies. Well, has anybody seen Wonder Woman 1984? There's just a lot of extra that's unnecessary, or like Jackie Brown with Quentin Tarantino. There's just a whole bunch of extra that is unnecessary and does not drive the plot forward. In books and in movies, you know, you can skip all that, make it a nice, well-developed artistic expression. And that's what I found in the book is that, there's not a lot of fluff or filler, to make whatever word quota that I guess publishers could be or what. You have to write a 5,000 word essay for college or what have you. You end up using a lot of fluff and filler, especially if they cut out and the, there, that. You know what I mean? Yeah, you find a lot of fluff and filler, but there's none of that here, and I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess we sort of talked about this, but if you are not familiar, the book is about a woman who is living and working in 1970s California, and she is transported mysteriously, happenstantially. We don't, and I kind of like that she doesn't explain why this happens to her. She just like leaves you to wonder, which is for me is like cool and creepy because it's like, well, if it could, like it's that like element of science fiction that's like, could it happen? Could that happen? So, but that's what it's about. She's transported to the antebellum South in Maryland, where she obviously is treated as a slave because she's a black woman. But she's there to save like her ancestral line, to make sure that her family basically lives. And as you read, she finds out, and you, the reader, find out that her, I don't know, it's like great grandfather is a slave owner. Like that's where the family line starts, is that he's a slave owner, and it's and her ancestor is the slave. And so that's the premise of the entire book, but it gets so good from
Yeah, there are some subplots and twists and turns, and I'm halfway through it, and I'm just like, I might finish this book tonight. I have to know what's going on. I'm a little scared from what y'all are gonna say because
It is not in. Well, depending on how you think about it. I like that. So the first time that she goes back on time, she's there for like 15 minutes or something. So she like sees this little boy drowning, and she goes and she gets him and she resuscitates him. The little boy's father or mother like is hitting her like, "What are you doing to my son?" And then the little boy's father shows up with a gun, and she disappears back to California. So there's just this like little bit, and it's dark outside. It's out like clearly like outside somewhere. There's like trees and a pond, so you don't get anything the first time she goes. Like you don't understand what's happening or where she went, and like there's more reveals like every time that she returns.
Yeah.
And it just gets like crazier and crazier.
Yeah, and I think it like I think that's like it's not. I mean, it's sort of fast paced, but it's not. And in like I think that's what like makes it kind of a fast read, is that like every like you're always finding out something new, right? There's always something new, something that's developing, something that's happening. So it feels like a really fast read. And it's a short book. It's only like 270, 290, something like that pages. It's not like a super long book. Um, but it is really like I think that helps, like that's a really good pacing thing, is that you're always finding out some new thing, some twist, something's happening. And
also that we share her experience in that we are modern going back with her experiencing it from like she's all modern free thinking black woman who doesn't doesn't go by the N word, rather be called uh black or negro whatever, and you know uh the way she is reacting is the way we would be reacting, other than I mean, as for us, we can only imagine what
Right.
we see or whatever. Even if you see it in the movies or whatever, as illustrated, it just doesn't hit home. Like when she went back the second time,
Mhm.
she could smell the sweat. You know what I'm saying?
Let's say I actually like you brought that up, and I'm like, that's one of the things that I highlighted while I was reading. And so the quote is she's talking about watching this man being beaten, being whipped. And she says like she's seen it in movies with the, the real looking blood and, and admittedly like cringing during those scenes. But then she says, but I hadn't lain nearby and smelled their sweat or heard them pleading and praying, shamed before their families and themselves. And like that just was like a urge, like,
Yeah.
and it makes it real, right? It makes it very real because we've all seen those movies, right? We've seen movies where shit happens and we're like, it's so gross. But like,
It hits you, but it doesn't hit you. You know,
right.
because we're separated from it. We do not have to worry about those circumstances in, well, we didn't have to worry about those circumstances. Let me say that. It's a whole different set of circumstances. You don't get whipped, you get shot now. You know, you just die. They spare you the pain and just kill you. But no, in all pseudo seriousness, um, we are separated from that type of uh, that type of punishment, legal, enthused punishment without repercussion, with without fear or anything. You know, that was the norm. That's what it was. And even though people can say, "Oh, it's so wrong," and this, that, and slavery or whatever, it's it's just so. She just puts it so in your face in a way that I never thought about it, in a way that I've never seen it described before. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And this is in '79, mind you, which is again, I go back to her research and ability to articulate that. Fantastic. Fantastic.
absolutely.
What
Um,
along those lines, I'm sorry, Megan.
no, you're good.
I just like when I was looking up stuff today, she said she was inspired to write Kindred because she heard young Black people minimize the severity of slavery and strongly assert that they would have not tolerated if they had been enslaved. She wanted them to not only to know the facts of slavery, but how slavery felt, and she wanted to make young people see that surviving slavery made their ancestors heroic, which I think is what you guys are talking about. Like totally hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's good
There are
insight.
other
I was
things.
wondering what motivated this.
Yeah.
So that
She also apparently did like a ton of research, and she went to Maryland and was like, "This town is here. This town is here. How long does it take to walk? Like, where would I run if I was running away?" Like, she did a ton of research.
Yeah,
wow.
I was reading about that. She looked at maps and she went to Maryland. She did the research to know like this is where you would go. This is how they would do it. This is and there was so at the end of my book there was a critical essay mentioned that there's a part in the book where she's sitting in the cookhouse and she's the character is relieved to see that the children are like sitting on the floor and playing with each other and eating, out of bowls, like even though they're eating with their fingers, eating out of bowls. And the character remarks that she's like, at least here it's not as bad as like some of the things that she learned about in history,
Like
where
eating from a trough.
being fed from a trough. And so, like in this critical essay that's at the end, that is actually taken from Frederick Douglass's biography, where he describes that that's how the children were fed.
Oh.
And I was like, and it just shows how well Octavia Butler researched this book to be able to add a detail like that um, into her story.
Can I bring up a different detail, which I thought was pretty good?
Yeah.
So, when they were talking about Nigel's dad, Luke, getting sold and sent to Louisiana,
Ooh.
they were talking about how in Maryland it was pretty. Even though you were a slave, you you had your roles. You were in the field hands or whatever. You may have did stables or horses, but like in Louisiana, you had all that plus rice and sugar cane and just really more intense labor and probably bigger plantations and certainly uh, I would think the punishments depending on I would think it would be more regular than not to have just mean spirited, treat you as an animal and a commodity more than, a a a being of character. You know what I mean? And it's like at least the Waylon, wait,
The father, yeah.
that guy he was just a product of the day, but he seemed halfway fair and decent. You know what I'm saying? Do your job, stay out of the way, don't talk back. Kind of the silent black slave codes or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Just yes sir, no sir, do your job or whatever, and we're good. Don't be insolent. You know what I mean? Whereas I think in Louisiana it would be a lot. In Texas, Mississippi, all of those very deep South kind of states is going to be a very different experience than one described in Maryland, which I never thought about. I just thought it was hard all the way around, unless you just got that rare, you know, massa. And how I'm interested in to know where that spelling came from, like the you know what I'm saying? I thought it was like Massa, like massa. You know what I'm saying? Whereas
I think it's just
Marcy.
colloquialism. Yeah, I think that's just like master with a southern drawl, maybe. I think it's just like spelled the way it sounded like in different regions.
That makes sense.
Maybe. I feel like I've seen it, but I don't know where. Just like it didn't. But yeah, I don't know. It does make it seem more like a title. But like more friendly, I guess, when it's written out that way. I don't know. I had a thought about it being like, you guys are all frozen.
Oh, we can still hear you.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
No, I finally had something. But yeah, about it being like not like it's one of the better places. I feel like that, like I felt like that was really important to the plot too, because it seems, especially first to her, it seems like not the worst place she could have ended up, but it's still terrible. Like for everybody, nobody, like there's nobody who's happy or even like content to really to be there. Like it's not, I feel like multiple accounts of like people working on like old plantations where like white people come and like want to know about like the owners. Like, what were they nice to their slaves? Like that's apparently a thing that people think happened. And the point is like, no, there's definitely different degrees and like people who are actually sadistic as opposed to people who are just like held shitty views that were in accordance with the times, I guess.
Right.
Like none of it's good.
I think that brings up. Sorry, keep going.
Oh yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say in the critical essay, the part where they're talking about the Frederick Douglass book is like, I think that's where he says it's like it lures her and the reader into a false sense of security, like the cookhouse is a safe place, but it's not really. Like none of it is actually a safe or comforting place.
Yeah.
Like that brings up an interesting, like, do we think that Rufus was better and nicer than his father? Like, did Dana have like an effect on him, and that like made him a slightly nicer person, or like he's still a terrible person all around. And I flip flop on this, so I'm interested to see what you guys thought.
Huh. I have an opinion right now, but my opinion could change.
Sure.
So,
But like that's interesting. Like as someone who's halfway through the book, how do you feel about Rufus?
Man, I feel like put on the spot and trying to develop that because I'm still like formulating that. So where I'm at, and I guess if we're just gonna talk openly about it, so he got his ass whooped by Isaac. You know what I'm saying? Alice's husband.
Yeah.
And it's because he raped her. You know what I'm saying? And so in that regard, I understand that as Elizabeth put it, you know what I'm saying? It's accepted in that time frame, and so if Isaac hadn't have done that to represent for his wife, you know, there wouldn't have been any punitive thing or whatever. But I also see that where Dana affected him, especially when she brought Kevin along, and she explained that that was her husband, and they were able to do that. He was so taken back, but it also caused him to probably see that, hey, my friend Alice, you know, that he comes up with the whole time, he starts to have an affection and affinity for her, and without Dana, maybe that didn't happen. See, I keep looking at parallels like they're all, you know, they're related. The family aspect and how it's drawn out in the future. Maybe she's meant to go back there to affect that so she could be there. Like it's some weird space-time continuum thing. I don't know. Flex capacitors and stuff. I mean, I'm all confused trying to put it together. But I think that he is, I don't think he's worse than his father. I don't think he's worse than his father, although I don't think his father's like, he's a bad guy as just making decisions and enforcing the punishments that were available to him. But I don't think he was like a terrible slave owner as far as slave owners go. Kind of a weird dichotomy there. You know what I'm saying?
It's a weird scale.
I mean, slave owners despicable, but you've got like level 3 despicable and like level 10 despicable. I'm gonna put him in like a 3.54 maybe. You know what I'm saying? Whereas the son, I don't think he even wanted to be. He grew up with a lot of them. He had an affinity for Nigel and like Luke's or Aunt Sarah's children, you know, that were sold off or whatever. And so I don't think that he would have brought the same harshness as a holder. And again, I'm only halfway through, so I don't know. I don't know how this happens. Y'all are looking at me like, wait. Right now, I have hope. I have hope for him still. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't know no better. Because I'm only halfway through. So I still have hope for him, and I think that he's been affected in a positive way by Dana, even though he rapes out of that positive change, so to speak. But he truly loves this girl. You know, or obsessive love. Is that more accurate?
And like sort of stalkerish and like it's ownership. It's still ownership, you know?
Oh yes, true. But he tried, you know, because he said if that's all I wanted, I could have done that in the bushes, you know, years ago. But I truly want to, like, if it was okay to marry her in this time, if I was in your time, I would want to marry her. But I think it's again, maybe it's not the true genuine love that you think. It's more of an infatuation, obsessive, you know, type of thing. But it's better than just buying her and just like, hey, you're gonna be mine, thanks. You know, which I guess happens. I think that's what is in the process of happening right now. I think that's what. I think
like
that's
where you're at.
Yeah, I'm not quite there. She just arrived. He just arrived back. You know, from going into town and mailing the letter to Kevin and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I am, and so I think that's the process. Though he probably bought her because she's now a criminal for aiding her husband to become a freeman. So that allows her to be, as a free woman, sold back into slavery or to become a slave because now she's a criminal. She's given up her rights whatever limited they were as a piece of paper could give her. But yeah, so that's my interpretation. But I don't think that he's as bad as his dad, but I still think he's bad. Is that sorry, that was a long
No,
circular way to get there.
that's great.
I
Let's say
apologize. But
this might be a question that you maybe don't want to listen to our answers for.
Oh yeah, cover your ears.
I'm giving you the out if you want it. Totally welcome.
just give me a thumbs up when y'all are done. Or should I just walk away? Like, should I mute y'all and walk away?
You may want to. It might take a minute.
You might take a minute. You might want to mute us. I don't know.
I'm still have to listen. Oh, this is gonna suck. But go ahead. Oh, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Just mute it.
I don't know what's going on, and I don't want to.
Just mute us. Like, sit there and just turn your
Yeah,
volume off, and then we'll give you the thumbs up when we're done.
Wait a minute. Can I don't think I can mute y'all.
Mute us on your phone.
No, all right. I'm turning the volume down.
All the way down.
I'm turning the volume down, and I'm muting myself as well. Hang on.
Okay.
Let me mute myself.
Oh, okay. I really flip-flopped up until the end, where like you can't do it anymore. It's fucked up.
I think the turning point for me where I was like, nope, no effect on him whatsoever, was when he sells, when Rufus makes the decision to sell, James? What's this? James? No, James?
Sam.
Huh?
Sam?
Sam?
Is flirting with her?
I only know that because I just went back and reread like the
Yeah.
last.
The guy there's a character who, like, he's flirting with her, and she's like, hey, don't talk to me, like, you'll get in trouble. And then she starts teaching the children how to read and write, and he wants her to teach his brother and sister how, and Rufus sees that and sells him.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't ask what they are talking about, like, he just, like, purely out of vengeance. And, like, for me, I'm just like, you're like, no effect, none.
I don't think
for
that's
me,
related.
huh?
Because I feel like that's more of his like intense possessive love thing. I'm not sure that's specifically like I just think for him that's just a way to get competition out that doesn't even exist because he's an insane person. But
Like, for me, it was just like I guess I felt like that if she had like this like openness, this willingness to talk, and like, let's talk about stuff, and you trust me and I trust you, and we can do this. If she had really had that effect, then he wouldn't have done it, right?
Yeah.
He would have talked to her first. Something would have happened before, right? Before he just sold him. And so for me, I'm just like, no, like, I don't think you had an effect on him at all. Like, and then like the same thing. And maybe that is, like you're saying, Elizabeth, like his possessive-ness, like when he doesn't mail the fucking letters. He lies about him. And I'm just like, you're a horrible person. You're a horrible person. Like, even his dad is like, dude, you can't fucking do that. And so for me, like, for those reasons, I'm like, I don't think she had any effect on him at all.
I think she had like a tiny effect, but I think Octavia Butler really sells it and thinks that she had a bigger effect up until like towards the end. You're like, oh no, if there was an effect, it was very small.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. For those of you watching, read it and tell us what you think. Or if you've already read it, tell us what you guys think about whether or not she had an effect on Rufus at all.
I do think Joe had a good point. I think Rufus is slightly better than his father because his father was more like, these people are property and not people. And Rufus was like, some of these people are my friends, and like this guy taught me how to ride a horse or whatever. So like there was that difference, but like coming down to it, Rufus will still sell people because they need money, because they're property.
or because
Yeah.
he doesn't, or because they're
And,
competition,
But
or
yeah,
because he
and
doesn't
seems
like.
like physical abuse is just like that's just part of the transaction. Like that's just part of it. So yeah, yeah. He definitely doesn't see them as full people, including somebody who's supposed to be his friend, who can
Right.
read better than he can.
oh,
Like,
And I think that part of it too is like and like I sort of get it, like his explanation of like, well, if I didn't do it, then no one would be afraid of me, and I'm like,
much of that is us looking back from 2020 a little bit. And like we know you could be a better person, and we've talked a little bit about like the product of your time and how that uh, presumably would have been really difficult. Like
Yeah.
we want him to be a better person, but like maybe he grew up a shithead,
And that's I mean, and I think that's a fair point. Is like how much can he grow, right? Like
Yeah.
in his environment, like how much could he be expected to change, because he's in a free state, or not a free state, but like he owns these slaves, like when they talk about when he talks about when Alice, like, hey, like when you die, will you set them free, like will you just let them all go? And he's like, no, because you'll kill me, which I thought was funny. She was like, I didn't think of that. And I was like, how did you not think about it? I thought about it and then you said it.
well, see, like that's the other thing. That's another reason I find it so creepy that like he's attracted to her at all. Is like she helped raise him. I mean, again, you're right. Like very little effect, but like we've seen him grow up. Like there's something to me about like following somebody from being a small child. It's more complicated than just like good people and bad people. Um, yeah, I don't. Yeah, so that's maybe why. Because she says a few times like she doesn't know why she likes him. She doesn't want to like him, but like some part of her can't totally say he's like a totally like shithead person, which I mean might be because he's an ancestor. But like yeah, I kind of get that. I've known people like that. Like I don't want to like them. Oh, actually I've known plenty of people like that. Like I have every reason.
A lot of people like that.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I haven't seen people in many months, and so I forget. uh,
I know Joe can't hear us, but I think we're good.
yeah.
If Joe can see us, then he'll be back. If not, he'll come back in a little bit.
Yeah.
So those are my views on it, about whether or not he actually changes. But I think it is a good point. Like, and I think like she does that intentionally, right? Like he's in this society, so I think we as readers, just like Dana, want him to change more, right?
Yeah.
But that's because we're looking at it from the outside, right? We as readers, just like her, are looking at it from an outside and being like, you can be a better person. You don't have to be the shithead.
As we're people, we want a good outcome,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which we don't get, or we do, depending on how you look at it.
I think the ending was perfect.
Yeah, I don't.
Not gonna lie, I wasn't upset about it at all. I was like, just stab it.
Talked about this a couple of times. Now Joe can't come back. We talked about this a little bit last week, where I was like, I was upset by like how sympathetic I felt toward him toward the end, and I do feel like she did that on purpose, because like that's the point when she points out how lonely he is and always has been. Like that makes me feel sad about it. But also now it could not have ended any other way. Like that's pretty much I think I'm not upset about the way it ended, because it couldn't have been any different.
I think if it had ended any differently, like then how could you how could you, I think it would change the whole meaning of the book, right? Because instead of then it's almost like Dana be Dana. Like if it doesn't end that way, then she becomes completely enslaved,
Yep.
And
right?
that's the one line that she wouldn't cross, and she told herself that. And it sounded like they had an understanding. I don't think they ever talked about it, but the understanding was like, you will never have sex with me or rape me or like this is not. And that was her thing. That was her line.
Mhm.
And I'm sort of proud that when it came down to it, she was like, I'm gonna stab you as much as I can.
Yeah. I was totally down for that. I was like, yeah. when in the book she's like, I took it out and I stabbed him again. I was like, fuck yeah.
Well, actually, so that was the thing. I wasn't like, I did not have time to reread the whole book, but I did read far enough, like start far enough. So I read the beginning and was like, well, I know what's happening, so this isn't going anywhere. So I just kind of skipped like the middle of the book. But there's a point, actually it may be right toward the end where he says he really thought Alice was going to kill him the first night that she came to like spend the night with him. And
Um,
he didn't care because he's like, if she killed me, then it's done. But if I'm alive, I have to have her, which is super creepy. But yeah, it's like I understand what that means. I think is like he wouldn't have minded being killed. Like he just that actually would have.
I think it's I think
Yeah.
he's far enough in the book that he knows that part.
okay.
No. Nope.
Nope. What?
Well, I mean, can probably infer it, but yeah.
I mean, we're talking about Alice, and
Yeah.
like you. Oh yeah, because you're in the point of the book where she comes back after having left Kevin there for 5 years. I mean, Kevin's been there for 5 years. She hasn't
5 years?
even. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, you didn't get that part yet?
no. That's no. That makes sense because he was, yeah, he was young. She went back and she was gone for 8 days, right? And then she goes back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like 5 years for them. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I forget about the time
Yeah. Sorry.
construct or whatever, but you actually put a frame on it. I think what's his name, Rufus was like 18 or 19, right?
Hmm.
That's how I frame it, and I don't know how old he was before that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm in that particular zone. Yeah, where what Margaret's sick and deranged and in Baltimore or something like that, and
Yeah.
she's about to brine Alice's wounds. Yeah, I know. I was like, ouch.
Yeah.
But it's good to know though, because things do go to pot or whatever. I need some like homemade remedies or whatever. So brining, yeah, cauterizing.
I sort of love how like aspirin, like something we take like
Oh
like you
yeah.
pop an aspirin for no reason at all, like just because you feel like it. I feel like I might have a headache. Let me take an aspirin. But like in the book, she gives one to him and he's like, these are amazing drugs.
And if like her medical knowledge is aspirin and keeping the wounds clean,
Yeah.
they're still far because that wasn't a thing. They didn't know.
Oh, yeah, what's it called? She had just washed the sheets and lie. And there she was like, I don't know how clean is, but that's gonna be as clean as I can possibly get. And she said antiseptic, and he's like, Anna what?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm excited to read the second half. I'm gonna power through it tomorrow. So I might be calling you tomorrow night, Mego, so I can have the second half of this discussion. And I'll definitely. Is this gonna be posted tomorrow?
I'll try.
Or,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I'm just whenever it's posted, I'll get the notifications in Facey Space or whatever. But I've got to watch y'all's conversation. I have to see what y'all's assessments and things were or what have you. And I'm sorry, I got the book last Friday, but
Hey,
y'all
no worries.
got twins, dude, and it wasn't gonna happen over the weekend. I
Yeah.
just I couldn't get myself into reading until they were off to school, and I had a solid like 3 to 4 hour window
Is
I
it not
didn't know
like,
if I was gonna like it. I was just like, I'm gonna have to power read this. It's gonna suck.
oh,
No, that's not. It's been fantastic. But that was me going into it. It's like I hate reading books. I gotta read a stinking book.
so my other question about sort of in framing things like it's 2020 and it's easy to judge things. Like, did you guys ever hit a moment where you sort of judged Jana for like, you know, being super patient with Rufus, or like she ends up cooking a little bit. She like falls into the role, not completely, but she sort of does. And I'm wondering if you guys had any moments of like, why are you doing this?
Well, I think it goes back to what you said about her motivation to write the story, and coming up as a young man, proud, virile, thinking militant, like, I'm thinking my parents ain't gonna tell me what to do. Ain't no way some white slave master back in the 1800s gonna tell me what to do. I downplayed it. Not downplayed it, but I certainly think, oh, that wouldn't be me. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, no, that would have been you just along with everybody else. And she did that as a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
I honestly think, and I was quite surprised with the ability to bring Kevin there or what have you. I don't think she would have survived without that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it kind of gave her a way to work around the system or through the system without having to abide by the strict adherence. She was able to have some wiggle room and some leniency. But no, I would like to think that she did almost everything that she could, but she found out after she got caught teaching Nigel, and he was teaching Carrie. You know what I'm saying? But after that lesson, when Massa Tom came in there, when he normally never teach in there, that's supposed to be, as somebody here earlier said, the safe space, if you will.
Yeah.
It was not the safe space. No place was on there was truly safe. Not even what's his name, Rufus's room, to a certain extent. Now she had his trust, so she didn't go through his stuff. But if his dad or Jake, I guess from State Farm, if he traveled back in time back there, I don't know who that go, the cousin of Margaret. You know what I'm saying? The new overseer.
Oh yeah.
If he would have found it, I'm sure he would have had that authority to go through her bag or what have you. So if it wasn't for that trust with Rufus, as well as Kevin being there to at least give her that opportunity to not have to be a slave to the Whalens. She was a pseudo slave to him, which allowed her a little bit of leeway. But yeah, I don't think she would have made it, and I that's certainly a survival mechanism. As much as you want to be, no, that never happened to me. No, that's exactly what's gonna. Think about modern day people are prisoners of war.
Right.
It may take them a while to break, but eventually they break because they know if they don't, they're gonna die. They're gonna be subjected to those tortures and stuff, and that's just our innate nature is to survive. If you're going to do what you have to do to survive.
So I think that was really like what you just said about, and answering that question of Micah's. So I highlighted this part of the book where she's talking about Sarah.
I think I know where you're going. Yep.
She says she was the kind of woman who would be held in contempt during the militant 1960s.
Yep.
The house nigger, the handkerchiefed head, the female Uncle Tom, the frightened, powerless woman who had already lost all she could stand to lose and who knew as little about the freedom of the North as she knew about the hereafter. And like, ooh, I just got choked up that. Like my whole body just. That's weird. Sorry, that doesn't usually happen to me. But I think like that passage in particular, and a lot of the times when she's talking about Sarah specifically, and maybe maybe because I'm a woman, maybe because I have kids, I don't know. But when she talks about Sarah specifically, it really like hits home that like that yeah, like it's and I think we think about this as like modern people all the time. Like, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have let that happen. I wouldn't have, but like especially when she's talking about Sarah, I'm like, nope, I probably would. Like, because I would just need to live, right? I would just need to live. And you don't, I think especially I think as Americans, we feel like we don't cow to anybody. Um, but you don't know what you'd cow to if you've never been in that situation.
I think the only thing that I was frustrated with was how patient she is with Rufus. Like there are just a couple of points that I was like, oh my God. And I understand that like she needs to make sure that her family line continues and it's important because for her to be alive as well. But there's multiple points I was like, this guy sucks and I don't understand it.
Yeah, I think there are definitely times for me where I'm just like, oh, like you don't have to like but I think too, like we're talking about like we're sort of mentioning that she watches Rufus grow up. And I think that's where a lot of that patience comes from, right? She's known him as a kid and she's seen like not all the way through, but she's seen him at these like stages, right? These really important stages in life.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes her so patient.
I
Um,
think, yeah, and seeing the way his dad treats him
Yeah.
too.
Well,
Um,
before Margaret left, think of the dichotomy of the father who's just nonchalant about everything, like not even there's just a nonchalance that he presents to every situation. He's just there to do the job. Like, I don't have to be loving father. I just have to take care of you. You broke your leg. Okay, here, let's throw you on the back of the wagon. Let's
right.
throw you on the bed. Your broken ribs and all this stuff. I don't care. Let's just handle it. And then the mother who's just like, are you hungry? Do you need anything? Super. It was described sugary. Warmth that she provided for him, and that's just a weird dichotomy. Um, these people who are supposed to be your parents, and one's like over nurturing and over loving and a bit overbearing, if you will, and neurotic, and the other one's just like, I could give a shit, man. I'm just, try not to kill yourself, okay?
Yeah.
Which is what he's doing through the whole book that I've read so far.
One, yeah, really.
Yeah.
There's also wonder if, because like he is pretty young, and just because like I guess people grew up faster or like shorter lifespan, so 18 is sort of older than it is now. Man, like he's it's not like at a point if he's an 18-year-old boy, like he is still a child. So I don't know if that's part of the patience too.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a lot of patience for 18-year-old boys who aren't at least slightly grown up. So,
Well, I think like that. I think that affects it. So like even though like we talk about like his era, right? At 18, he's a man, right? But
yeah.
in the 70s, we're moving towards what we have now, where you're not an adult until you're like in your mid 20s, really, is what most people consider an adult, right? And so she sees him as an 18-year-old boy, as a child, even though in his society he's a man, right? And I think that affects it. But I do have moments where I'm just like, come on.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
being a total dick. Like, come on.
Yeah, I am seeing where I'm at that there's a lot of his father in him.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he's like a alcoholic type of person too, or developing to become one. So I can only see that getting so much better, as he ages.
Indeed. So I have a lot of things here that like I highlighted from the essay also. And then there was one question here at the back of my book that I wanted to hold on.
And so I'm not going to get any resolution to the scientific part of it.
No, she never explains how it happens or why.
But she explains a little bit of the why, and I don't remember when that happens in the book.
Well, yeah, a little bit of the why, but there's no, she doesn't go into the science of like how it happened.
Yeah.
Well, it's just I guess the lingering question for me is everything worked out fine because she was born. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, she doesn't address that at all. She doesn't address.
Well, no, she does. There's like a point early on where she's saying like maybe I'm supposed to save him to ensure like my being born, but that doesn't. No, she says like that doesn't make any sense, and then it's just that's just it. And I kind of like that she threw that in there, like. Truly, I'm not going to tell you. Don't worry about it.
It goes back to the, well, never mind. I'll save that for afterwards because I just don't like I don't like open ends, and so this is going to drive me insane. I have to like try to put.
It bothered me because it wasn't like the point. There are books where it is the point, but yes, I had a hard time. But then once I got into it, like. By the end, I think you're okay with it.
So, I don't know about your book, but Joe, in my book at the end, there's a critical essay, and if you
I've got all that.
Yeah, so if you read that critical essay, it helps with the not knowing thing. If you read the essay at the end, like, because he quotes Butler, and he like, it's a very well written essay at the end, that helps. Because I was that way too. I'm like, but what if, and
I get neurotic about that stuff. Like, I can't watch Fight Club for the same thing because I think it's illogical and it can't happen. And it's like the greatest, worst movie that was ever created, but that's another thing. But it's my OCD and things. I need closure, or I need it to be logical and make sense. And I'm just hoping that I get some of that. Otherwise, I'm gonna be like, oh.
So this one, I thought this was an interesting question. So she said, the question is, how does Butler challenge us to consider boundaries, black and white, master, slave, husband, wife, past, present, and like, how does she convolute like those definitions? And like for me, I think it's really interesting because like the husband, wife, and the master slave thing, I think really plays out with Dana and Kevin, because you know in their time period they're husband and wife, and in when they go into the past they're master and slave, but they're sort of allowed to behave the same way that they would have behaved, right? To a degree, right? Not super openly, but and like I think like Kevin asked too, and like it is sort of this weird, like not Kevin, but like Rufus is like, so you own her? And she's like, no, he doesn't own me, but like sort of in a way because we're married, and like they like he sort of says that at some point. It's like I don't own her, but she belongs to me, I think is what they say, or something like that in the book. But I don't know. What do you guys think about like the relationships, black, white, like how the definitions of these things sort of get twisted in the book?
Octavia Butler, she also twists this sort of black and white in Rufus's time, because Rufus and Dana's relationship is totally atypical. Even though Rufus is friends with a couple of the slaves, it's very, very different with Dana, which I think is interesting. And it also there's sort of like this weird guardian angel thing that Dana always comes when he needs her, when he's
Mhm.
dying, basically.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting thing because there's also like this idea that Black people are here to comfort white people, and like that, like also like kind of makes me nervous about the whole book. I think is like it's just playing into that
Yeah.
this little white boy needs a Black woman to come and save him and take
Mhm.
care of him and nurse him back to health.
Yeah, it definitely, I think it plays into that, like the mammy role, right? Like
Yeah.
as much as she doesn't want to be a mammy, she is. She's his mammy. Like she takes care of him every time he fucks up. And that's the expectation, right? Like I think for me that's how she's drawn there, right? She's drawn there every time he needs her. And she's like, as much as she doesn't want to be in that role, that's her role.
Well, she comes to, well, at least from what I'm seeing right now, she comes to know that she needs it to a certain degree in order to survive there. And I don't want to say enjoys it, but it's like her one true connection because as she says, she watched him grow up or whatever. And so, and they have that weird dynamic, you know, it's like she is not typical of the all the other black encounters and slaveholder or white versus black in that particular era. Um, but I have a hard time with the question because I'm not sure if I understand it correctly, and so I'm gonna listen to y'all answer more because I don't know how to respond. I'm a little confused.
Well, and just it's basically asking like how does she take these two concepts that we feel like we have these very definite definitions of and like blur the lines.
Well, in their relationship, as I was stating, because she comes from a different time, and I guess she was able to articulate that as when he was in the river, young or what have you, and then when he, well, actually, I guess the curtain would be the more appropriate time when that
Yeah.
relationship really started to develop and things of that nature. But in it, that's where I thought it was blurred to a very significant degree because he didn't treat her like a slave, you know, to the degree that slaves like even he loved Alice and he still raped her. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Mm.
uh, it was just theirs was a normal or I guess as typical of a friendship that you would find capable in that particular area. The dynamic is just so crazy. But I think they had a pretty straightforward and understood relationship. You know what I mean? He cared for her well-being, trying to educate her and be like, "Look, you can't do that. You can't do this." Like with the book, for instance, when she jeopardized the space-time continuum by possibly getting all these prolific individuals who would end up becoming freedmen or you know
Oh
uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and his she recognized her mistake but he was like you can't have this here you thought you got beat before, you know what I'm saying? You really gonna get it if this is found. So he was genuinely concerned for her well-being, you know. um I think everything else was kind of straightforward except her and her Kevin's relationship, because he and it's kind of like the way it is now. Unfortunately, as empathetic and sympathetic Micah and Murdoch are, you just can't walk in the shoes, you know.
Mhm.
And so he could empathize and try to understand, but he didn't have to go out there and see those beatings, or he didn't have to worry about getting caught and teaching these kids to read, or he didn't see the the significance of them themselves playing slaveholders and selling each other. how come I was only $200 and you sold her for $500? And these are little black kids playing the games that are going to oppress them. You know what I'm saying? And he just, I don't know if we explain that to the listeners that her husband is a white man. So they were, as my parents were, cutting edge trendsetters. They were actually wanting to be together in the 70s or what have you. But he couldn't wrap his head around all the things that she had to protect herself, not only herself, but the people that she was around. Because if she got in trouble, they could be responsible for her, and then they get in trouble. So it's I think she did a good job of developing those characters and the situations, and really defining those things that bring them together and the things that separate them. You know what I'm saying? She did a good job with that.
I want to say Octavia Butler puts Kevin in as the straight man that you have to explain things to, who's the reader, essentially, right? And I don't remember where in the book it comes in, but Kevin does get a little bit of an education because he's stuck there for 5 years. And it's not like he doesn't totally understand, but he understands better.
Yeah.
I think.
I think you're almost there, Joe.
Okay.
It's almost, because I think it happens after. But I think there are a couple of interesting quotes where she like sort of explains that to Kevin, and she's like, you can, and I think it's right after they see the kids playing. She tells him like, you can be an observer, right? Your privilege of being white in this time period is that you don't have to engage, right? She's like, and she says that she can do that somewhat, but there comes a point where she can't, and she's fully in the time period. She doesn't have anything to protect her from what's happening.
And that's what I was getting, that he was kind of a protector for a while until that reading incident or what have you, and obviously what trapped him there for that time period.
Do we have final thoughts and feelings? Questions?
Comments?
Read the book.
Read the book. It's such a good book, and I know
it's thought provoking. It will get you guys. Read the book.
Yeah.
Yes, it will absolutely get
you. It goes fast.
Huh?
I think. Okay. No, you go.
Like reading it, I was like, is this a movie yet? Because this needs to be a movie or a miniseries. Like, this would be awesome.
It gives me I'll make a comment. Me having a white father and a black mother, I get feeling of indifference reading these kind of things. And although I do trend towards my black family, because that's the side I really raised on, and that's where I cut my teeth as far as foundational, culturally, and things of that nature. I didn't really know the white side of my family till well into my 20s. So, when this type of material, as we were discussing earlier, Roots, Rosewood, name something else of this genre, whether it be sci-fi or actual factual, it really.
What's that one?
Huh?
Sorry, I was thinking the movie with Denzel Washington where they're the Black soldiers.
Glory?
Glory.
Oh. Yeah.
Dude, yeah, that was rough.
Yeah. That was rough.
With Richard Gere, right?
Matthew Broderick.
Matthew Broderick.
Oh, yeah. Okay, there's another one that. Anyway, when young in his movie career, but yeah, Glory or whatever. Yeah, that was a good one as well. It just it gets me angry. It gets me I'm angry because all of that led to what we're dealing with right now, which is now people are trying to speak out. One, since we've got all the cameras and the 24-hour news cycle, and the things that black people, minorities in general have been dealing with since that time. It's only changed incrementally, and it's changed in a way that, okay, so we can't do it this way, so we're gonna do it this way now, you know. And these are things is like, but no, you've been freed. No, you have the right to vote now. Uh, no, cops don't pull you over and beat you for no reason. You know what I'm saying? It's like all these
There's
things
no
that,
such thing as inherent bias.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like, no, you don't have to experience that, and you can duck your head because it doesn't happen to you. And although you may not be racist, you think that because we have all these rights now that racism doesn't exist and it doesn't happen to us. You think that all of a sudden we are equal to you, and we are not still. You know what I'm saying? And that really aggravates me. And then I think about what my kids might experience later on. It's just, oh, a whole bunch of just gut churning emotion. And yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how to articulate anywhere that I'm confused. I'm perplexed. I'm mad. I'm happy. A whole gamut of emotions, and it just stirs inside me because I don't have, you know, I don't have white guilt, but I do kind of have, you know, black anger. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like, am I betraying one of my races? Like, should I be, just happy and be like, hey, I owned myself. All right, yay. You know what I'm saying? It's like mm, it's very neurotic and nerve wracking, and I don't know how to articulate it any better than it's very confusing for a person like me who culturally identifies in multiple areas, which makes me really identify in no area at all. And I don't know if you can understand that or not, but that's kind of where I'm at and I try not to read this stuff because of that. I don't like the feeling. I try to stay away from it, but it needs to be addressed in some capacity. And yeah, so there you go. I'm done. I bared my soul to y'all for a second.
Oh,
Now everybody will get to watch it too. So there you go.
Well, I think like that's really awesome that you've told us, and that's the whole point of our group, right?
Uh,
Is to be uncomfortable and to sit with these feelings and to have these conversations, and it really says something that we were able to do this, or you were able to sit with these feelings and are sitting with these feelings, reading this book of science fiction that like, you know, um, right? Like this
yeah.
this sort of unassuming book has you know made you think and feel and have these
Oh, dude, I
conversations.
wanted Isaac to kick the more crap out of that dude. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, uh,
So absolutely, I'm like, yay! That's what we want. We want you to be uncomfortable.
I don't want to be
Not you,
uncomfortable.
but everybody.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think we're supposed to be uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, it's good for everyone to be uncomfortable. The
Yeah.
more, and well, I guess I would say as long as you're willing to sit with it, you have to sit with that
And you know
uncomfortable
what? I don't
feeling.
want to have the black anger or the white guilt, and I don't want any of y'all to feel either way either. You know what I'm saying? As uncomfortable as it may be, you know what I'm saying? Because we're living in a different set of times, and we can affect change unlike any other generation before us. You know what I'm saying? Well, I don't want. We have the opportunity to affect change, unlike any other generation, because we have those abilities that they fought for us to have.
Right.
on both sides. Like women's ability to vote, whether you're black or white. You know what I'm saying? You have a voice now. You know what I mean? And so that's good things. But we can do more. I think we can do more. Just as a society, we can do more.
I think Megan's point, and I might be wrong, I may have totally misread this, but if you don't sit with things that are uncomfortable, you don't learn. That's how we got to the situation. Was something terrible happened and you didn't want to watch it, and you turned on the TV or you looked at your phone. Like if you don't sit with these uncomfortable things, what is happening right now will continue to happen.
Right.
Oh yeah, exactly what I said.
It's
It's
not
like,
just
no,
that.
that didn't happen because I refuse to acknowledge that it happened.
Yeah. Well, exactly. So to me, it like sitting with it also means because I feel like I see this happen a lot where people are like they get uncomfortable and so then they justify it or they decide that it's not real. Like that's the other thing that they do instead of sitting with it. Um,
That's how you fall into crazy conspiracy theories, I think.
uh,
I
or
don't,
even just that very basic thing that I just have seen so much lately that it's just like, well, no, like no, people are just like this isn't real. Like people are just being oversensitive. Everything's fine. Or like, well, the cops are justified in what they're doing. Um, like yeah, exactly. You get into weird mindsets, but it's not even as bad as like, or it's not as like crazy as conspiracy theories. I feel like that's maybe like the high end of the spectrum. But like, yes, there are definitely things you can tell yourself that you're like, well, I don't have to worry about that. Oh yeah, or that's the one I see so much is like, well, I am not racist. So, and I never see anybody else being racist. So clearly,
yeah.
like everybody's they're just blowing it out of
Here's them.
proportion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a good person. So there's no more racism. Yay.
There you go. Now that's where you hit it on the head. There's a
Yeah.
lot of that, you know.
I have been like reading up or like I guess I've like been seeing more things lately about like individualism is actually toxic. Like it's something that we think of as being really positive, and it is. I mean, it's good to be yourself, but individualism as in like only caring about like what happens to you and your immediate family is toxic. It is not that is not social, that's not community. That's not helping anybody.
Yeah.
That's more of a self-preservation and a tribal kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Only the
Yeah.
people that matter to me matter to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Megan's having children running around or something.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Nara.
Yeah, one thought I had, like we had passed the point, but I remember that I did want to say, I think one of the reasons that because I had like I would like read and read and read and then like deal with my kids. And I just like got weird feelings like dealing with my son. And then I was like, oh, well, like that's kind of the same relationship. Like he's 4 and he's so sweet and we're buddies until I tell him he can't have something or just he gets hurt and decides it's my fault and then he screams and hits me. Like I was like, oh, it's like I'm seeing Rufus in my kid, which is bugging the crap out of me. But like that's why, because he's 4. He's not emotionally intelligent yet. He's mildly abused.
It's funny.
uh,
Yeah.
I don't want to like do kind of without Megan. She
I
has to.
know.
You may have you may have to without her, unfortunately. I think she will
Yeah.
understand if we are bringing it to a close, if there's nothing else. Because I don't have anything much else except that I can't wait to finish the book and see what happens. I want to see what y'all had to say about the next portion. So, but I look forward to that.
Well, so there's the link to the Facebook down below. You can go talk to Megan. There's links to some information about Octavia Butler. The next time we'll be recording is the 26th, so 2 Tuesdays from now. We don't know what we're doing yet, but it's going to be awesome.
That it will.
You know what I'm going to do is I'm gonna cut this out, and then I'm gonna cut Megan back in by herself.
So thank you guys for tuning in to Blackbird. We will be talking about something else in a couple weeks. Let us know your thoughts, questions, whether or not this made you want to read the book or never read the book. I hope not the second one because it's really good. So thanks for joining us. And as always, don't be a racist and wash your hands.